Give a very, very major thank you to Mrs. Ank and Mr. Anderson for putting all of this together. For whom this would not be possible. And a very special thank you to Friend Viking Boosters for their support, for your parents. Yes, yes. And take the time to turn to your teacher and thank your teacher for taking you here today. And being a part of this. You'll never forget this. Never, ever. Yeah. And finally, turn to each other and say how awesome the person sitting next to you is. Yeah. All right. Well, 8th hour of the very first day. This week is already flying by. We have Kevin Covell here with us today. He actually was here quite a few years ago during a previous Writers' Week. He is a poet and community builder. As the artistic director of Young Chicago Authors, founder of Louder Than a Bomb, the Chicago Youth Poetry Festival, and he's also a professor at the University of Illinois Chicago, where he teaches hip-hop aesthetics. Yes. So he's mentored thousands of young writers, artists, and musicians. So he is also the author of over 10 publications, over 10 books, and a play as well, including one of the books including the Breakbeat Poets, New American Poetry in the Age of Hip Hop. So he has also very generously brought a few of his books here today. As you probably saw, a lot of folks up here sharing and meeting him. He has offered a few of his publications for sale, and he will sign so you can see him afterwards. So without further ado, I'm sure you'd rather hear him than hear me continue. So I am very proud and honored to introduce Mr. Kevin Covell.
I like the slow clap, thank you. Friend, what's good? How you guys doing? This is the end of the day? Last period? Yeah. What do you guys do after this? What goes on after this? Homework. How many people have jobs? Okay. Anyone going to work right after this? Yeah. Can anyone get me like a free sandwich or anything like that? Bet. Okay, slide for an oil change. I like that. I could use one of those. Cool. All right. Well, it's good to be with you. My name is Kevin. Happy to be back at Friend and excited to share some work with you. I hope that we might be able to engage in a bit of a conversation too. I talk a lot, and I'm going to read some poems and share work, and I really appreciate the space to be able to do that with you. But I would also love to engage in a conversation to hear what's on your mind and what you're thinking about, and be able to, have some space for any questions that you might have. So while I'm talking, please feel free to remember or even write down a question you might have about something I said, or any of the work, or just writing and art or whatever in general. Cool. Well, how many first year students in the building? Very quiet. I know. You guys are so polite. You guys will know one day. You know what I mean? How are you guys doing so far? First years, you guys, is it okay? Are they being nice to you? I know you can't say. Look, if you're having issues, just blink profusely and we could talk afterwards. Where the sophomores at? Sophomores? See, first years, you guys could be sophomores. Next year, just a short period of time, you'll be that loud and vivacious. Where are the juniors at? Juniors are very bold, very proud of themselves. Juniors, you guys are really biding your time, I guess, till next year. And of course, where are the seniors at? How many students at Friend? A lot. 2,700? Oh my God! Wow, this is a big school. Okay, lots. Okay. Well, look, just be good to each other. Please be good to each other. And I'm going to read some poems. I'm going to start with a collection of poems that came out a few years ago. I think in 2017. It's called A People's History of Chicago. Yeah, 2017. A People's History of Chicago, and it's a history book, but it's a history book in poems, obviously influenced by the historian Howard Zinn, who wrote a book that I read in high school called A People's History of the United States of America. Has anyone ever heard of Howard Zinn, or has anyone ever heard of A People's History of the United States of America? Some of y'all. So, do you still take, or is it required to take U.S. history or American history your junior year? How many people like that class? Okay, all right. So, I graduated, to give you an idea, I graduated high school in 1993. Thank you. Yes, okay, good. I like it. Grown people in the house. And my junior year, they made me take a U.S. history class, and I had read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States of America the summer prior to entering my U.S. history class. To the chagrin of my teacher was, unlike your teachers, my teacher was very old and racist. And so when I brought to his attention a counter narrative to the whitewashed European myth that he shared with our class about even the discovery of this country, the first page of Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the United States, calls Columbus what he is, which is a colonist and a slave trader. And the professor, or the teacher, I guess, was, did what he did rest of the semester, which was to send me to the dean's office. And so this book, in some ways, is very much about countering the dominant stories of our time to tell a different story about Chicago. There's 77 poems in there. I'm going to read some very personal poems and then get into a bunch of new work that I'm working on, because at this point, this book to me is old, although I feel really excited about it. So I'm going to start with a poem about listening and coming up listening to hip-hop music. I'm going to say a word in here that I hope you will know. It's called a cassette tape. Does anyone know what this is, a cassette tape? Am I blowing people's minds right now? People, you're familiar with what a cassette tape is? Listen, I mean, look, I don't know. You don't need anything other than this. So there was a crew in Chicago called the Mole Men, and they put out these series of instrumental mixtapes that my generation of Chicago MCs would rap over. And they put out different volumes periodically throughout, like a 5-6 year period in Chicago. And that's kind of how my generation of Chicago rappers learned how to rap. So this is called Mole Men Beat Tapes, and it goes like this. Mole Men beat tapes were copped from gramophone. Cassettes jammed into a factory-issued stereo deck of the hoopty I rolled around in. A bucket, bass and drum looped with some strings, sample fixed, a sliver of perfect adjusted. There was so much space to fill. An invitation to utter. Iqra, Allah said to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. A to B-side and around again. A circle, a cipher. I'd drive down and back in my mom's Dodge for these latest volumes of sound. I'd stutter and stop and begin again, lonesome and on fire. No one I knew rapped. So I'd recite alone to myself on Clark Street, freestyling, shaping my voice, sapling, hatchling, rapping, my life emerging in the dark of an empty car. There was a time when hip-hop felt like a secret society of wizards and wordsmiths, magicians meant to find you, or that you were meant to find, like rappers I listened to and memorized in history class talk specifically to me, for me. And sometimes you'd see a kid whisper to himself in the corner of a bus seat, and you asked if he rhymed, and traded a verse like a fur pelt, trapping this gold or food, this sustenance. You didn't have to ride solo anymore. Jonathan was the first kid I met who rapped. He was black, from a prep school, wore ski goggles on top of his head, and listened to the Wu-Tang Clan, which meant he pretty much rhymed about science and chess. His pops made him read Sun Tzu. His man's Omega, a big Puerto Rican kid, wrote graffiti and smoked beaties, and they'd have friends, and the backseat would swell, and the word got passed, scooped like a ball on the playground. Sometimes you take what you were given and lift off like a trampoline, rocket launch, and sometimes you trip, not quick, tongue-tied, words stuck on loop, that, but breakthrough, knife sharp, mind darts polished and gleaming. We'd ride for the sake of rhyming. We took the long way home, or wherever we were going. We'd cruise down Lake Shore, back again, blasting, blazing, polishing these gems, just trying to get our mind right. Right? That's that piece. Thanks. So look, I was not a great student. I struggled to get through school. I think I have, just particular learning abilities. And I think one of the ways, I have to be like up and active. I played ball in high school, and so I feel like if I'm seated for too long, I get really antsy. And also I hated school was the other thing. And so but I teach now, and I've been teaching since 1997. So it's kind of a odd irony, because the kids I gravitate towards now are the kind of the knuckleheads that I was in class. I would sit in the back or sit in the front and like try to battle my professors or not engage or whatever it is. And I think part of what I try to do as a teacher now is to make sure everyone in the class says something, because I think sometimes, especially as the number of students in schools inflate, we can hide in schools. And I think public school, particularly, what you're in, this is a public school, right? Okay, good. That public education is about really trying to meet the needs of every student. And so I'm not always successful as an educator, of course. It's a tough job teaching. Just ask your teachers. They're overworked and underpaid, and they got to deal with your dumb ass. And so the point is this, and God bless all of you, but teaching is hard, and I never thought I would be into it. I never thought I would get into teaching. The reason why I did is because I was running around Chicago in the mid-90s as a poet, and one of my buddies asked me into a alternative high school to teach creative writing to his students, which I thought was a horrible idea, but it clicked. It was something that I really enjoyed doing, because we got to sit around in a workshop space, maybe 20 of us, and talk about the poetry of hip hop. I brought in a Lauryn Hill record from the Fugees, and we talked about Lauryn Hill, and we talked about Miss Gwendolyn Brooks, and then they wrote and shared their stories. And I think so much of being a writer is also about being a listener. And so as one of my jobs as being an educator, I get to spend a lot of time listening to the students that I have an opportunity to build with, and I feel very fortunate to have that opportunity. So this is a poem about that practice, about that exercise. This is in the same book, A People's History of Chicago. This is called How to Teach Poetry in Chicago Public Schools. Look clean. Wear fresh kicks, jeans, iron them bits. Get your hair cut. Because even in uniform, the baddest students swagger on 100. And those are the kids you hope to build with. The ones who got a crate of albums on heart. They listen to everything. Wheezy, Gucci, Wayne, Baby, whoever y'all listen to. They might recite alone in their room their own lyrics, or to their girl or a little brother. And they might be reluctant to share, especially with the teacher, especially with the white boy. Start with the rhyme, something quick, a half note behind, West Side double time, their ears picked, able to roll with all those syllables. Now read a poem, something slow, familiar, and offering to Gwendolyn Brooks and Carl Sandburg sitting on your shoulder. Ask where their favorite rapper comes from. J is from Marcy, yay the South Side. And everybody know Wayne is Katrina's soldier boy. From 97 to 03, have a firm, well-reasoned opinion on who is better, Pac, or Big. After that, Young Money, New Language, Kanye couplets on memory. Photocopy Willie Perdomo's Where I'm From the wrong way. Do this to mess with them, to throw a monkey wrench into normal. None of us are from Spanish Harlem, but Inglewood knows about police. And every block in the hundreds got old men who talk smack, and guns that fire cracker, and grandmothers who stir big pots, and the whole west side is littered with nieces telling you to look past blue box streetlights, because regardless of where you are from there. I mean, you know there, but have never been asked to expert. So speak on it, talk about it. All you gotta do is sit that ass down and write. I think it's that simple. Thanks, y'all. How you guys doing so far? You guys all right? Good. So look, I write a lot. You know, I write a lot, and I wake up at the same time every morning, and I work. I wake up at 7:23 every morning, and I get up and go to my job, which is to sit down and write these poems. 7:23 because I'm a neurotic Jew, and also because I do my own numerology. Any Jews in the audience, by the way? Shalom, all right. All right. Good to see y'all. Glad I'm not alone. The point is this. No one asked you to make art, you know? And so there's no factory you can go to punch in and to collect a check. You know, if you're gonna make art, if you're gonna be an artist, you kind of rely on your own discipline and will to do so. And I got very lucky because, you know, I played ball in high school and a little bit overseas in Wales. And so I took the discipline from athletics and applied it to art, meaning that if I was going to be good as a basketball player, I had to get in the gym and go to practice and run suicides and do all the drills that I thought were tedious in order to become good. And the same is true with art. You know, you have to put in the hours in order to be excellent. And so no one really is going to ask you to do that, but if you know within yourself that you have something to say or contribute to the world artistically, then just sit and do it. You know, and I think the thing about being an artist is that there are no rules to it. You know, you make it up. You make up your own hours, and you make up the way you go about it. And I would say, like, if you're going to be an artist, you also have to be an incredibly diligent, studious nerd. You should invest in your own research into the form and genre. And so I read a lot. You know, I read as much as I can. I read anything that comes out in the forms and genres in which I'm interested, and I just devour it. And I learn from people, and I try to take the best of what they're doing and maybe see if it might apply to my own work, and then try to ultimately, you know, say something that is in my own voice, you know, that I want to put into the world. And so I get up at the same time, 7:23 every morning, and I write. If it's okay, I would like to read you something that is brand new. I don't know what yet, but I'm so old that the book I'm working on right now, I'll talk about a collection I have coming out in the fall, but the book I'm working on right now is a new and selected book of poems, meaning that I'm so old that I can do that now. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna take all of the old books and take some of the best joints from them, and then I gotta write new poems at the top in order to put that in. So could I read to you some of the new joints? Is that cool? I was going to anyway, but I appreciate the cosign. Let's see what it is. So this is you know, and I've not read these poems publicly, but this is from my buddy Idris Goodwin, who's a playwright. I've written a bunch of stuff with him, including a play called This Is Modern Art that was done at the Steppenwolf about graffiti in Chicago. So Idris is how many of y'all have like the homie that you're like damn near daily, you're like checking in with, or you get like the cosign for like little things? You're like, you might call the homie and be like, yo, should I get this sandwich or nah? And your homie's like, yeah, you should do it. You know what I mean? Or they like give you sage advice that like you don't need to eat that whole, whatever, you know what I mean? So Idris is kind of like the dude that I will talk to, if not, you know, he lives in Louisville now and he has, you know, a kid and a whole ass life and a wife and everything like this. So we talk often. So this is for Idris because he deterred me from making, I think, a very poor choice. It's called Ben Franklin, another reason I gotta salute Idris. Thank you, my guy. for not allowing me to get a tattoo that read, "Pay dues forever," in tiny bubble letters down my left forearm at 40. You said I was too grown for such foolishness. The line in MF Doom Jim on De La's grind date, rock cocaine flow, the record we both know they should have put out after stakes is high, when the BPM progresses at the end of each verse, and Zev, Paz, and Dave all keep up masterfully like Apollo Creed. Indeed, it was a horrible look, the ink, but I think you meant the ethos. Not to not put the work in, always that, but the work itself enough. And the shine doesn't matter either way. It's about if you can handle being cold or not, and that's fire. And the fire you don't have to pay shit for. Bet. All right, so Idris is the homie, and I'm working on all these new poems. But I want to share a few more joints with y'all, and I'm going to talk about the collection. But as I'm doing it, as I'm reading these last few poems, if you can keep in mind that at the end, in just a few minutes from now, I would love to be able to engage in a conversation and talk with y'all about what's on your mind. And so, as I'm reading these joints, please think about what it is. This book that comes out in the fall is it's called "Everything Must Go: The Life and Death of an American Neighborhood," and it's about my experience living in Wicker Park, a neighborhood in Chicago. How many people have been in Wicker Park or know Wicker Park in Chicago? Okay, that's what's up. So Wicker Park, like all Chicago neighborhoods have changed. It's changed greatly, and Wicker Park is kind of where I landed after playing ball in Europe, and it was my artistic home and still is in a lot of ways. But it's changed, and the book is a memory of sorts to the people I knew who are not there anymore. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm the last person I knew from that era who still is even around and is around Wicker Park. People I know have been pushed out because of socioeconomic reasons. They've died, they've been killed, they've been jailed. But no one I know from the old neighborhood lives there anymore. And so part of the book is trying to wrestle with what does it mean when a neighborhood changes or gentrifies? What do we lose? And what do we want in terms of a public space? What kind of city or cities do we want our spaces to be, and who do we want them to be for? And so these are poems that are still very new, but I handed my manuscript in last week. And so this book will come out in the fall. I'm going to share a few poems from it, and then have a bit of a chat with y'all. So this is a poem in it. It's called "The Time I Was Homeless and the Car Was Also a Bank." At least the diners stay open late. The Ham and Bone at Western, the long car on Irving, the White Palace at Roosevelt, temples of halogen lights and refillable mugs where waitresses are kind, and sometimes the hand they put to mine to lift my head from nodding is the only time I'm touched that day. I know where Holmes is tucked beneath the Kennedy. I've known the North Branch of the Chicago River at dawn, long before I signed a lease. Bags of clothes, books, a citywide storage locker, the only key in my pocket. I sleep in my car. I sleep at my man's, at my girl's, my mentor's, before I lose her. 2 a.m. couch surfer, sucker, baked bean, Aldi booster. The tips I take at the end of my own shift are rolled in a Bustelo can, tucked in the space the spare's supposed to be, next to a knife, a roll of quarters, a quart of Listerine, a bar of Irish Spring, a toothbrush, a box cutter. I do laundry at the Y. I'll clean anyone's clock. That's that piece. Cool. All right. I'm gonna read. I think I'm gonna read one more joint and then open it up for questions. So I'll say this. Dating is hard. Do you guys have that experience? You guys go on? Do you let you date a friend? What goes on? Because it's awkward. It's awkward at any stage. You know what I mean? And it doesn't necessarily get easier. Maybe it gets worse. I don't know. But this is a poem about a relationship and the first few interactions in the relationship. called A Girl from the Neighborhood. I asked my man to ask your girl for your number, and bam, we got 22s of honey brown and walked the park. You said you wanted to hear something I wrote. I whispered a little rap in your ear beneath a giant oak. Met you at the gig, an after-school arts program Beto dragged you to. Her husband rhymed and we worked together. You came to the settlement house on Augusta in the sweaty ass air of August, hair pulled back slick, said some funny shit about the food and smiled. You said you wrote a bit too, and why that's some sweet spot you put your palm to. When I said, I'll pick you up at 7, you thought I meant 8. I was on white boy time. Had to wait a whole half hour while you got ready, and you're not really little cousin Carlos, baby giant full of slick talk and jibarito, started to roast me on the wooden stairs I came to know your uncle built. Carlos bust out and said, yo, you know what? You look like that dude from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. First of all, it's not that funny, okay? I don't look nothing like Rick Brown. And the little ones cracked rainbow-colored smiles from freeze pops melting in their hands, and Carlos was victorious and not yet 11. Later you told me his dad was killed a year ago, a few blocks from where we stood. The sun sunk west, and all the apartments spread shadows on the ground slow, like a sheet unfurled in the few lovely moments is suspended above the earth, the bed, your body before finally falling. We made it out on Milwaukee, walking south and stopped in front of Earwax, the coffee shop I knew all the bus boys and could G-weed at. You looked inside, said you weren't hungry, said you didn't eat white people food, got mad at the idea of a veggie burger. All the new faces, the white faces, my own, in the glass, your eyes, whales like the school closed, the lake, great ocean crossing, bacalao and African bloodline. You said you couldn't go there, this space wasn't for you. You wondered what we were doing here. A year and a half later, we'd yell in the vestibule. You'd rip my shirt and the plastic buttons bounced down the steps your uncle built. And of course, you were right. But I'd hoped this was something different, or I was, or this was the city big enough to love you in. So, thank you. All right, y'all. So this is the deal. I have literally like hundreds and hundreds of poems, but I would love to be able to engage in a conversation with you all. And so I'm going to get a poem ready just in case. But in the meantime, I would love to open it up and see what is on your mind and whatever you want to know and build on or ask questions about, points of clarity or contestation. Let's have a bit of a chat. All right, so if you got something to say, maybe raise your hand or just speak loudly because there's a lot of y'all and there's only one of me. So yeah, can we do that? What's on your mind? Yeah, what's up? Hey. I'm just looking into space, so just, yeah, hello.
So for the poems that you're writing, did you take inspiration for them from your life experiences?
Yeah, for the poems I'm writing, did I take inspiration from my life experiences? Yeah, I mean, I think I am a writer who relies a lot on research and also my own memory. And my own memory, is not necessarily always dead on. And so I also invent what I also remember sometimes. But the basis of the new book is really like I conceive of it as a graphic novel of poems that is based on who was there and who I knew and where we used to run and the spots we used to go. And so much of it is really based on my memory, but in order to write it, I also had to jog my memory and do a lot of research about, what was there and the addresses of places and even some of the how Wicker Park became to be Wicker Park in that moment in order to kind of write a more holistic sense of what the neighborhood was and what it had been, and then also understand how and why it began to change in the way that it did, if that makes sense. Yeah.
When you think about struggle rappers,
Yeah, what do I think? What did you refer to them as?
Huh?
What kind of rappers?
struggle rappers.
Did you say struggle rappers?
Yeah.
Damn. That's how you feel. I know how you feel, I guess. You don't like Herbo? Huh? Okay. Yeah, okay. All right. So first things first. Who do you like? Yes, yeah, you asked me, I'm asking you. Like who? Like who? Yeah, love Lauryn Hill. Yeah. So you got like your parents into music or something? Oh, that's just you. That's all you. All right, okay. I see you. Well, I'll say this. I mean, I think one of the things that hip hop I think tells or teaches us or tries to teach us is that we should be attuned to the fresh. You know, hip hop is constantly reinventing itself. And hip hop is also the culture of young people, particularly, primarily young people of color who are also reinventing the world and the worlds around them. And so I hear you. Like, I know I'm 43. I've been listening to hip hop pretty much every day since '86. And so I have a lot of my contemporaries who will hate on the new music and the new generation of practitioners. But for me, I feel like they just sound old to me and kind of washed. And I feel like part of what hip hop demands is that we also pay attention and stay in tune with what is being done right now. So do I think that the rappers today are as gifted lyrically as the rappers in the era I grew up in? I would say, as a whole, no. But it's also a different thing. The rappers right now, I think, are incorporating much more melody. They're more in tune with the music. You can't just, they're not just rapping over anything. They're really, I think, making better songs now than they did in the day in some ways. And I really love so much of what's happening in hip hop right now, as I have for the last 30 some odd years. So I stay very interested in what is happening, although I also go back, especially when I want to really go into the content of a record. I'll go to some of those rappers that you mentioned, but I think that they're look, Kendrick is of this moment. I think in terms of Chicago artists, Saba is one of my favorite writers of the generation. And if you don't know Saba, that's fine, but I'm putting you on to people who are making, I think, the best music in the world right now. Saba, No Name, Smino. These are people who I think are adding a lot to our contemporary sonic lexicon because they're altering the way that hip hop sounds. And so I stay very excited about what's happening in Chicago. I do like Herbo. I also like, I like a lot of stuff though, and I have the capacity to, I think, understand people's lanes and maybe disregard some other things too, if that makes sense. So I just stay open, I try not to judge, I guess. Yeah. Top 5 dead or alive? It's tough, man. Let's do it though. Right now, and also I cannot be beholden to this list in another 5 minutes. All right, fair? I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say Black Thought. I'm gonna say MF Doom. I'm gonna say Saba. I'm gonna say Lauryn Hill. And I'm gonna say Miss Gwendolyn Brooks. All right? Is that 5? Is that 5? I feel like that was 5. All right, another question. Yeah, all the way in the back.
Can you explain a little bit of your process of finding a publisher?
Sure. The process of finding a publisher, I feel like I've just always been lucky, and I've been in the places where people have introduced themselves as publishers, and I'm like, oh, we should do a book, and they were like, okay. But I think part of that is to say that I've also been out reading my poems for a fairly long time, fairly consistently since 1994. I've been out in the world reading poems, and my first publisher was involved in the Chicago spoken word scene. It was a small press called EM Press, and they did my first books, my first 2 books of poems, and I loved them, and I loved the experience of publishing with them. They did an anthology called The Spoken Word Revolution, and I gave a poem for that book, and I told them after that experience that I had had a whole manuscript that poem also came from, and they said that they were interested in it. So I think some of it is you have to put yourself out there and kind of say what you want as a person in the world, probably, and particularly as an artist. You have to kind of articulate to people who can help you get the things you want, what you want. Otherwise, people can't read your mind. The publisher that I'm with now is a good-sized Chicago-based publisher, and I've been publishing with them since I think 2008. 2008 or maybe 10 or something like that, maybe 2010. And I think, I feel in a very good situation because they're like, we'll do whatever you want to do. And so I feel as an artist, it feels good just to have the freedom to create. And I know even a lot of my peers don't have that situation. And so I feel very lucky that I have that situation. But I think if you are interested in putting your work into the world as a poet or as an artist from any genre, I think start with the people around you, I think that there's different ways, there's so many different ways to publish right now, given, the democratization of technology allows you to communicate with a growing number of people on a daily basis. And I think you could screenshot a poem and put it on Twitter or IG, and that's a way to publish, And if we're going to be real, probably more people will read it there than it will than they will in most literary journals. And so the prestige isn't necessarily there, but certainly the readership is. And so it's also a question of how do you want to build a readership in an audience? And I think you could start with the people around you, Other questions, concerns, comments, points of clarification? How are we doing? Yeah, hi.
Okay, so what's the story behind Louder Than a Bomb?
Great. So Louder Than a Bomb, Chicago Youth Poetry Festival. It started 19 years ago. So this is an official invite. We have our festival that starts on in a few weeks, and it's become the world's largest youth poetry festival. We create teams of poets at high schools across the Chicagoland area, and they come together each spring and battle one another. And a poetry slam, of course, started in Chicago by a construction worker poet named Mark Smith and a crew of others, some of who have helped put it into the world, like Mr. Sampson here. And so, these are the folks who propelled this form to make poetry more like a sport, because America loves sport, but America also needs story. And so we create these teams, high school to high school, around the city and around the Chicagoland area, and they come together and go through a month of this competition. This year at Louder Than a Bomb, we'll have 110 teams from every zip code in Chicago. There'll probably be about 1,100 young poets who are participating in the festival, and we now do 90 events over 4 weeks. And so, friend, this is your formal invitation to come out and see what we do and see what your peers are saying from all over the city. People who look like you and people who look nothing like you will be there, and you'll hear from every kind of experience on those stages. And I think it'll be inspiring. I think if you're a writer, you should certainly come, because it will give you a sense of the pulse of where young writers are at in this moment. And all the information is just at youngchicagoauthors.org, and you could also find me on the internets too. But yeah, I really think it would be great at some point for Frem to have a team, or at least to send folks to see if there's an interest in the possibility of how. I know you guys are busy, but it's a really transformative experience, and you'll meet very dope people from around the Chicagoland area. Cool. Anything else? Any other questions? Yep. What's up? Yeah, please. Yeah.
You listen to anything other than rap and death metal? Like 6ix9ine listens to death metal and makes rap,
Well, I definitely don't listen to 6ix9ine, but well, just because he's whack and a child molester and highly problematic, and those are the reasons primarily. And he snitched and whatever. The point is, I know, that's fair. And I also feel for him, because he's a young man in a terroristic prison industrial complex, and I don't wish that upon anybody, and that system wreaks havoc upon particularly young people of color, of which he is one, and so I wish him no harm. I'll say this in terms of your question. Hip-hop introduced me to every other genre, because hip-hop is comprised of every other genre, because it's a sample-based diasporic culture. And so hip-hop introduced me to jazz and blues and soul music and its samples. And since I've become open to any kind of music as long as it's fresh, And so, yeah, I think I listen to a lot of stuff, primarily hip-hop, but also jazz and other stuff. I see you all are getting ready. I will be up here if you want to chat or have a future further question. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for having me today. Thank you.